Apparently, in America at least, there's something of a labor movement going on. Essentially from some Americans thinking, I've always hated this job, but now I'm not going to do it.
Working 9 to 5, what a way to make a living.
You have about 4 good years where you just can do whatever you want and take your time considering things or jamming things into, hopefully, your mouth. But then, the rest of your life is just doing pointless shit. After childhood, you have one last summer where you blow it with Condoleezza and shit your pants, and that's as good as it gets. The rest of your life is just working. Working. And the 2 days you get off, if you're lucky, that's just about, ow, I've been working. And as you get older, that only gets worse. And if you make it through the Iridium Wars and gun violence, then you can retire and your chemo is half off. Great. Really, a lot of this seems to be because the carrot that gets people working is becoming less attainable, increasingly unattainable. I say this not even as a moral thing, as a Machiavellian. You need your workforce to have a sense of progress, where they can feel like either I have a job mopping floors and it's shit, but one day I'll have a better job. I'll get a qualification and I'll move up the ladder. Or, yeah, I have a job mopping and it's shit, but I can do that and still save money and still leave a better future for my children and still one day maybe buy a house or something, rather than people who are just stuck and they're just working and barely maintaining themselves. I don't know, why do I feel like I'm going to get an ice pick in the back of the head for saying you need to incentivize people more than just barely surviving? It doesn't help either that people in low-paying jobs are clearly not treated well. You only have to have been outside in the last 2 years to see that. Go to Dairy Queen and you'll hear someone calling the cashier a bitch. I don't know where this anger comes from. I do. We all do. If you're not in a profession where you're regularly being called a bitch, so not in service, and if you're not being treated like an android in a warehouse, then you probably still work for a corporation where they treat you like shit in the most condescending manner. No benefits and a drug test because if you smoke weed in your own time then you can't work here. All of you are unimportant. Oh, what is that? A loan from the government to keep you all employed during coronavirus? Thank you, you're all fired. The sort of place where if a manager wants to talk to you, they sort of do this dance around you and placate you for 30 minutes before telling you off a bit. I mean, just tell me what you want me to fucking do, dude. Maybe at the same time as people scraping by, they can have a nice chat with a crusty old professor who says, "You're not taking this seriously. I need you here all the time, and you've got this work thing. Well, in my day, I just worked during the summer, and that was enough to pay for my rent and tuition." I don't know. It seems a lot like the people on the levers are kind of out of touch, doesn't it? When are they going to fucking die? I feel like that's the limits, right? I'm just going to have to wait for the old bastards to die. So basically, I think as a casual, ignorant observer, that the this is bullshit labor movement in the US and probably elsewhere is to do with a lack of economic, realistic progression and also people being sick of being treated like shit. Maybe people would be more okay with, I'm going to be in this fucking squalid little flat for the rest of my life, but I have a really nice job. Or vice versa, but not both. What would the other one be then? I'm going to be in this shit job, but I'm in a mansion. Yeah, people would be fine with that. I'm gonna fucking work at Dairy Queen and take loads of abuse and work with this prickhead supervisor whose mom told him he was gonna grow up to be Gordon Gekko. Yeah, I'll do that. $179,000 a year. That's worth it. I would do that. I'd probably do it for 6 months and then fuck off. So yes, obviously there's a certain irony of a mouth on YouTube who has never done a day in his life willingly talking about this, sure. But I have done jobs in the past, and you should probably know that the rest of the video is me more or less just talking about the shit jobs I've had. So if you don't fancy it, then thanks for watching so far, I guess. Goodbye. I should do this more often. Like, instead of chapters, just this next bit might not be your cup of tea. Goodbye. Is that fucking dog hair? So YouTube is interesting because obviously they're in a position of absolute power over me. Not only could they get rid of me at any time, according to their terms and conditions, there's nowhere else I could really go and do the same thing. But at the same time, they leave me the buttery fuck alone, and I really appreciate that. So, thanks, lads. I know you're watching. Good job with... Where's YouTube Heroes? I wanted to be a YouTube hero. Where's that? Come on, sign me up. I want to be a hero. I want to get all my community points. One thing I've learned from both working and talking to people who are done or working is that your battalion, your school, your district, your region, it's not just that's badly run. It can feel like it's the exception when you're in it. Like, oh my god, this place that I work, it must be the worst one. It's not. It's all badly run. Human beings are as thick as flour in shit. The first job I had was as a postman for the Royal Mail, and it was awful. The people I worked with were really nice. All the posties were great, but it was extremely badly run. Royal Mail gave me 1 day's training where they proudly said that they were the least technologically advanced postal operator, not just National Postal Service, but any private operator too, the least technologically advanced in all of Europe. And the only other training I had was they had a little articulated wooden dummy with a spine, like representing a human spine, and they showed the difference between picking up with your knees and your back. And then everyone had to go up in front of everyone to pick up a box. Oh, yep. Is that? Yeah, knees are bent. Yes. Yeah. Honestly, it was like that. Oh, yeah. And then we went around the room and everyone had to say what their favorite album was. And I said Jimi Hendrix. The Jimi Hendrix... Actually, I don't think it was an album. I think it was the best of Jimi Hendrix, which isn't an album. The best ones. The best of Jimi Hendrix. And the woman in charge made fun of me because I was like 18. And she said, I thought it would be Bob the Builder. Because being 18, that's what I would be into. Basically, I quit because I was being paid from 6 a.m. to about noon, but I was actually having to work until about 5:30, and they weren't willing to talk about overtime, so, bye. And then after I quit, they continued to pay me for about 13 weeks, despite me constantly telling them every time they paid me, please stop paying me. I called them up, I emailed them, nothing, and then they found out, because I told them, and sent me a really threatening letter saying that debt collectors were coming to my house in the next 7 days if I didn't pay them back, and the money they wanted to be paid back was twice as much as they had ever paid me. Luckily enough, I knew someone who was the accountant for a company who looked at what they were saying, and saw that it was bullshit, called them up, asked them about the tax code, and I guess they shit their pants and said, don't worry about it. Very weird. When I was at college, I got a job for a company called Listen, or something like that. Essentially, it worked on behalf of charities to phone people up in the middle of their dinner and say, you give £20 a month to breast cancer awareness, don't you? That's very generous. Why don't you give us 80? And then work down from there. You had to ask people 3 times, even if they were saying, no, no, no. It was the most soul-crushing, horrible job I've ever had. It was probably the job I've only ever really dreaded going to. Once I called someone up and they were crying, and I asked them what was wrong, and they said, my mum just died. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. And it really sounded like their mum had died like an hour ago. And I got chewed out because I didn't ask them for any money. People who stayed on longer than 3 months were either the most ardent sociopaths or become something they had never wanted to be, because they were quite vicious. Old people would slam the phone down, so they would just call them back 20 times a day and just hang up the phone when someone picked up. it was nasty. It was gross. When I was fired, I was gonna quit on like Thursday, and I was fired on Wednesday for doing impressions of Jerry Adams because I was gonna quit. And they said, "Oh, you're taking this very well." And I was like, "Yeah." And I sort of regret being courteous. I wish I'd gone mental. How dare you fire me? They weren't actually legally able to fire me. They had to give me a warning first, and they didn't. But well, what did I care? But I could have made a scene, and I didn't. So I don't know. Is that a brownie point for me, or is that just regret? I regret working there. To be honest, probably made about 400 quid from it. Oh, fuck that. Fuck that. And when they fired me, it was like a 45-minute journey to get there. They fired me in the first half an hour of my shift. And the guy said, "We can pay you for the hour. So you can pay me like £7, even though I've spent about 9 quid getting here and back." Also, while I was a student, I had the best job I've ever had. And certainly the best minimum wage job I've ever had. I think it was exactly the minimum wage. £6 and 5 shiny pennies. It was a tutoring job. That's right. I used to work with kids. And it was great, because I didn't work there all the time. It wasn't like being a teacher or anything where you have to think and, deal with these children. You were in charge of 6 kids maximum, and they just got on with doing computer exercises. That was tutoring. And there wasn't a lot of tutoring going on. Parents out there, if you think signing up to some plan where you can visit a tutoring centre 6 times a month for £200, if you think your child is going to get any effective tutoring, you're dreaming. But it was great, and once one of the parents took the wrong kid home. And that was a very fun 15 minutes. Before I left Universitoire to enter the abyss that was, and still is, the job market, I got a job working for a businessman who owned a business-to-business business, essentially providing corporate training services to a handful of enormous clients, all banks. But his business was nothing to do with this lecture idea. And the lecture was about social injustice and inequality, and essentially it was a lot of subjects in one, and that's one of the many reasons it never happened. But really, the main reason it didn't happen was because Mr. Homunculus was really, truly more interested in the praise of doing something progressive and sort of investigative and, it'll be like Zeitgeist, but not conspiratorial. It'll tell the truth about how the banks are fucking us, even though, Mr. Herc, all your money comes from the banks that you massively overcharge for your nonsense product. There were lots of problems. He didn't really want to do it. So, to not really do it, because it's a massive arseache to do a lecture and learn it, and the guy who actually wrote it wanted Mr. Wanted Mr. Homunculus to learn it off by heart, which was ridiculous. And he tried to do that, but eventually it sort of gave way into, why don't we make this a comedy act? And the lecture can be my massive bit. Jesus fuck. At the same time as all this was going on, Mr. Homunculus was trying to produce and help raise finance for a $5 million-ish film. And at one point, he lent me to the director of that film to gopher for that director, but he told the director I was being paid £400 a week, and I was in fact being paid £300 a week. The idea being that if and when the film actually got financed, Mr. Homunculus would be repaid 3 weeks of £400 a week rather than 300, and therefore make £300. Why do that? I don't know. I mean, I saw the fucker eat that much cheese in one sitting once. Very strange. He would do things like sort of tell me constantly, like, "George, I think in a couple of months you're going to have to find another job, or you're going to have to work on this lecture thing," which then became a documentary, "for free, and get a job to support that. Because I can't afford you, George." And that's fine, it's his money, but at the same time, he would come back, he would go out, I would work in his house, he would say hi, go out and fuck around and come back and have bought all sorts of shit. I remember once he told me, "Get another job." "I've had enough, get another job, fucking get out of my ass." house, he said. And I was like, okay. In 2 months, though. And he came back and he said, guess what I've done? There's this diet program where they deliver dehydrated food to your door 3 times a day, and it's guaranteed if you stick on it, you'll lose weight. It's only about £350 a week. Thanks, dude. Didn't help morale either that his main brag seemed to be how much money he'd spent on prostitutes. By his own estimation, 100 grand over 3 years. I don't feel very valued. It got into this really weird penny pinching mode where I started to be really concerned constantly about the economy because Mr. Homunculus was constantly concerned what the S&P was doing, and if it didn't do well, whoa, that was it. These projects were off. Constantly. He didn't really need to dangle that all the time, but for some reason he did. And eventually the project was meant to have 6 months left, and he'd always promised at least 2 or 3 months of notice if things changed, but no. Both I and Damien were laid off from this with 2 weeks' notice. So Damien went back to Sainsbury's. But at the same time, I was also doing random, boring, horrible shit in the UK film industry, which frankly was gross. That's a whole other video. It was hierarchical, needlessly tense, petty, and inevitably everything we were making was absolutely bollocks. Anyway, Mr. Homunculus' ambitions to be famous, I guess, sort of petered out. I do remember being paid hourly and spending about at least 40 hours. I mean, it was a good, solid week where, under his direction, he and I developed a script and characters, and I wrote the first episode of a 12-part series, only for him to call HBO up and say, we've got a dynamite script here, and for them to say, we don't take scripts from the outside world, we've got our own people. And for him to go, oh. Because none of these projects worked out, Mr. Homunculus turned his attention back to his company, which he decided he would sell for $50 or $100 or $500 million. All ridiculous. Whatever. He then made the mistake of hiring me. Not because I fucked anything up, but because he made me the social media manager, and it was a total non-job. Really, most of the job was just reporting on doing things and not doing things. Waste of time. Boring. Before offering me the job, I had decided that I was totally burnt out on working on film sets for free and being abused for it, and working in corporate environments that were just, ugh. So I decided that I was just going to save my money and fuck off to the Caribbean and try and work out what to do with my life. And that didn't change after he'd offered me my job. But what did change was my mum got ill, so I went back to live with her. But I didn't need to live with her permanently or anything. I just stayed there because it was a lot cheaper. So I hadn't told Mr. Homunculus' company that I was going to quit work eventually for them and become a travelling bum. So the month before I was going to go off, I just quit, and I just said I'm not going to come back to London. And they obviously assumed I was going to stay to live with my mum, so they said just work remotely. So I did. I travelled all over the Windwards working for them. I went to the interior of Guyana, where no mobile reception or anything. I just automated Twitter. Was there for about a week. They had no idea. For whatever reason, the company at some point decided that they would turn their attention to YouTube. Like I say, it was a business-to-business company. There was no real reason to have any public-facing anything. But whatever. Turn to YouTube. I've been uploading YouTube videos for them for years. So they asked me these really, really naive questions about maybe I could talk to YouTube. Maybe it would be okay if we use things that don't belong to us because of fair use or something. Maybe you could ask YouTube. Like YouTube are going to talk to me. So I asked them, like, hey, this isn't how YouTube works. Do you want me to explain how it works? And they gave me this reply that was like, you don't know what you're talking about. We've got our lawyer on it. And the stuff the lawyer wrote was hilarious because it was all about not using any fair use stuff because YouTube could sue us. And even if YouTube promised they wouldn't, legally they could later. And it would be a good idea if I got a meeting with YouTube to work out a deal where they would not monetize the videos, but we could use other people's stuff. It was stupid. It was really stupid. And I just, of course it was. The lawyer was a contract lawyer. It was like getting a dentist to look at your arsehole. So I just thought, fuck it. And I just stopped bothering, really. So yeah, eventually they found out that I was living in Mexico then, because I just couldn't be bothered, and I had to do things like log into LinkedIn, and they would say things like, there's a weird login from Mexico here, and they'd ask me about it, and I'd say, really? That's strange, as like, gas flama azul, 30, 5. In Mexico. I'm like, Mexico? Why would it be Mexico? I have no idea. In the background, that was, if I didn't make it clear. At the beginning in St. Lucia, it was literally like, hi, George, where are you calling from? My bedroom. And there's like a guy with steel drums next to me, selling weed. Also, for some reason, they put a lot of pressure on me to lobby Wikipedia to get Mr. Homunculus his own Wikipedia page. Which I'd actually done when I was a jobbing gopher for him directly, and Wikipedia had promptly obliterated it for being irrelevant, which it obviously was. But they really wanted me to sort it out and, like get a meeting with Wikipedia. Like, I can't make the offsite tomorrow, lads. I've got to meet the Wikipedia boys tomorrow. It's going to be a toughie. I've got to take them out for a lobster dinner. If they don't respond to that, I'm thinking I'm going to have to get the corporate credit card and take them to Bar Pony. I mean, why does he need a Wikipedia page? What's the point of that? But then, I wasn't doing anything else. I certainly didn't do it. I would have preferred, actually, to spend time, like, making a completely fraudulent email chain from someone at Wikipedia where I'm, like, trying to coax them, trying to explain that Mr. Homunculus is an important public figure that should be documented in a stub article. Anyway, after becoming disillusioned because they didn't want to hear my opinions on not doing stupid shit on YouTube, I gave up, and I planned to quit at Christmas, but they found out I was living in Mexico at the time because I stopped giving a shit and fired me in September, and I had no job and no income, because YouTube at the time, which I was shitposting to privately, and you're now watching, wasn't making any money. And that sounds awful, but it was great. I felt really liberated. And it was like, if it doesn't work out and I run out of money and have to come back to England and get a shit job in a supermarket, I'd rather do that anyway. Take that, Mr. Vincent van Gogh, call yourself an artist. I left a pretty well-paid job to be a penniless shitposter. And, that's it. That's all I've got. I guess the last thing I would say about the job revolution thing that may or may not be happening is it seems to me way more about people don't want to be treated like garbage whilst not really making a lot of money. I mean, that's fair, isn't it? People still want, people would still do those jobs if you paid them better, so... anyway, before anyone goes, if you have a job that you hate, I'm sorry. And if you've left a job that you hate, good luck. Good luck to everyone in the future. Except Dale. I'm not really telling you any of this as, like, any form of advice or I think people should do this. I don't think people should do that. I was lucky, and also I am the sort of person that I really don't like working with people. It's like drinking diluted acid every day. If I stopped making money on YouTube, I wouldn't get a normal job. I'd go and live in the woods. So if you're not like that, then, don't take my advice. This is not financial advice. All right? Bye, Doge!